Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 3 of my 2001 Orion Space Clipper build. A lot of great progress on this kit. I got the rest of it all put together and sealed up, sealed all the seams on it, which was definitely a challenge, and I'll show you that here in a few moments. I got it painted and decaled. Decals also represented a bit of a challenge, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But for this video, we're pretty much going to wrap up this kit and have it all together and painted, other than just a little bit of weathering, and then onto a base. All right, so let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, so you can see from the previous stills that I started sanding the seams, lines on the top and the bottom of the Space Clipper. Some pretty major seams, especially on the top, that I had to clean up quite a bit once I got it glued together. And so the previous shots I sanded down as much as I could, and I just had an initial coat of the German gray or the dark gray on it, so I could do the sides over here. And they're still going to stay white, so I'm just working on the top part right now on the bottom. What I'm doing now is I used a technique I mentioned in the last video, that I get some techniques off of other YouTubers, and this is another technique from the same YouTuber, Buck Moore, BTM Modeling. Great channel, you should really check him out. He has a lot of great things on there that he does. He's working on a lot of Star Trek kits. Right now he's working on Voyager from Star Trek. But he had some great ideas. What he uses for putty instead of like your standard model putty is Bondo. It comes in a tube like this, Bondo glazing and spot putty. It's really nice because it comes out in a really smooth consistency. It's still solid enough that you can put it into some bigger gaps, but it dries within about 20 minutes. It doesn't have that pastiness to it that you get from most model putty. So thanks for that hint there, Buck. I just definitely like it. Another thing he suggested, and I've seen other modelers do, is use some tape, and I just have some Tamiya masking tape, and you just mask off the seam that you want to do the putty on, so you're not getting the putty all over the kit. So that way you just do it in the spots you need it, and then when you move the tape, you just have that one area to smooth down. So all right, so I did this yesterday and I let it dry. So let me go ahead and take that off, and then see how that looks, and we'll start sanding this seam down and getting it to be what it ought to be. All right, there you go. So now I just have a lined section where the putty is on there, just along that seam, so it didn't go into the other places. Makes it a lot easier to clean up, like the panel lines, like that big one there. The rest. This has a lot of horizontal panel lines as well that I want to make sure I dig back out. So, all right, so let me go ahead and get those sanded down and get that smoothed off. I didn't put any on the bottom, mainly because I want to kind of maintain that center line. It kind of looks more like it should fit down underneath, and plus you have a lot more of this complicated detail that you'd have to try to get around, and that would be a lot harder. Those ones right there. So in this race panel, so I don't want to work on I don't want to mess with those too much. So I might put like a piece of flat styrene on this one here, since all it is a rectangle. Might do that, so that hides that seam, but the rest of it I'll probably leave as it is, and the back doesn't matter because it'll be over top of the wings. So all right, let me get and start working on that as well, and we'll get that sanded smooth, and then we can start doing our painting on it. All right, I got an initial sanding on the Bondo, and it turned out really well. I got it fairly smooth. I'm going to use some smoother sandpaper to get a smooth finish on it, but it sealed up that gap nicely. And as far as that little cockpit area, I took a piece of thin styrene and I cut it out to kind of match it, so that area will be nice and smooth. Since it's that indented part right there. It will also help the photo etch windscreen to fit on a little better and have a better seat on it. So, all right, so I'm going to finish fastening this and then get this glued down onto here, and then we'll get the windscreen on there. And once I get that all done, well, I have to get that painted and put on, and then I can mask that off, mask off the side windows, and be ready to start painting. Okay. All right, so that piece is glued on, and I kind of rounded the edges a bit and sanded it smooth. So that gives it that nice distinctive outline without any kind of a seam in the middle of it. And you won't see the seam in the front either once I get that smoothed out, but this rounded part here will be distinct, and that's what I want it to be. And once that's painted, that'll just all blend together. All right, so let me finish working on getting the photo etch cockpit piece going on, the windshield, and get that completed. So here's the photo etch cockpit windscreen glued onto a piece of clear plastic. I think it's PETG or something like that. Here it is. It's really clear. It just has a plastic coating on it to protect it. It's very nice. So I peeled off the front part and I glued it onto the back of the photo etch. I still have to peel off the back. I'm leaving it on for now to keep it protected. But the front is just clear. You can't tell because of the backing. So, but I have that sanded down, so I'm letting it dry a bit more, and then I'm going to try to get it positioned into the cockpit area. All right, and then on the bottom, I put a little piece of flat styrene to take the place of the part that was there and smooth over the seam. As I showed in the previous stills, I also cut out a little piece to fit in that front little scoop, because there's a seam in there as well that you could see. And this will be painted black probably. Alright, and then I got it fairly smooth. I think that's as good as I need to do right now before getting this on. So let me go ahead and try to get that in place. It's going to be a little tricky because I have to get it glued and curve it and bend it. So let me play with that a little bit and see about getting that in place, and then I have to mask off the window so it doesn't get any paint on it while I start painting the rest of it, and these ones as well. Okay. Alright, so I finally got this piece properly bent and glued into place. Really tricky, because once I get the plastic on it, well, the piece itself, it's a rough fit. Getting in those little corners and getting it curved just right, and you can see there's a pretty good gap on the top there, but I can fill that in. So the sides and the front look good. Once I got the front piece there, I used some very thin styrene stripping, really tiny, and just kind of glued it around the edge of it to clean that edge up a bit, because it was looking kind of rough. So that looks pretty good. And the sides look okay. And the side profile looks good too. Alright, so finally got that in place. I'm going to let that dry for a bit, then I can touch up, like, get that to focus. Like that little corner right there, I can fill in just a little bit and smooth it out. That one looks pretty good. And the top, I can just fill it in once it dries sufficiently. I can put a little bit of putty or Bondo to smooth that edge, and then just sand it down flush with the top. Alright, so I'm going to let that dry. And I have the clear plastic in there, like I said. So once that's fully dried and I'm ready to start painting it, I'm going to mask off those windows right there so I can paint the rest of the kit. All right, so that's coming along pretty well. It's a tricky kit for sure. I didn't think it would be, but with the photo etch, probably if I just built it straight out it wouldn't have been, but with the photo etch and the lighting and the things like that, it's a lot more difficult. So all right, so we'll let that go ahead and go and dry, and then we'll get that sealed around it better and move along. All right, so I filled in the top there behind the windscreen with some Bondo that I showed earlier, and that's hardened. So I started sanding it down. I still have to smooth it down some more. It was a rough fit for the windscreen, and the back edge of it was just a little too high, and there was a bit of a difference between that and the back of the fuselage. So now it's even with it, so I set to sand that smooth, and I went ahead and put some Tamiya masking tape onto the windscreen to protect that clear plastic behind it. I also did that on the side windows. All right, and that's the reason why I painted this in the first place, the outside, before I put it together, because especially these, I have clear plastic inside of them, and once I sealed it up, I wasn't going to be able to put in the interior or put in any of the clear plastic. So I painted this the way it's supposed to look in the end, and now I have it sealed up to protect that, and it's white underneath the tape, so I don't have to worry about masking the individual windows. I can just paint right over it and it's ready to go. And when I'm done, I can just peel that off and it's already white the way it's supposed to be. All right, and then the windscreen, obviously I had to glue that after I put it together, and it's also painted. So if there's a few edges sticking out, that's fine, but as long as the plastic part is covered up. All right, so as soon as I get this smoothed out, I'll be ready to go ahead and start painting. Okay. All right, so I got that Bondo smoothed out nicely. You can see a profile there. I may have to do a little bit more sanding. It feels smooth, but it's hard to tell until you get some paint onto it. I also glued that piece on there on the top that goes there, and I believe that has a little bit of like soot behind it. It's like a vent of some kind, I think so. All right, and I believe I have that top seam all nice and smooth as well, and so I'm ready to go ahead and get a coat of the dark gray onto there. All right, so let me go ahead and do that, and then we'll see how that's looking. All right, so I got an initial coating of a dark gray on there. It's looking fairly smooth. Looking pretty good. My Bondo's blending in nicely. And this is just the undercoat. I'm going to put white over top of this, obviously. And I'll probably just do a little bit of smoothing of this when it dries. I turned the lights on, and at first I thought, oh no, the lights aren't working because I can't see anything, but they're working just fine. So I did a good job of masking it from any light leaks. I took it into a dark room, and it's just the slightest little bit of leaks, just tiny little bits coming through the cockpit windscreen. It's really hard to get that right up against the metal, but it's not noticeable in normal light. And I'll also be getting another white coat of paint, so that'll blend that all in and get rid of that. So okay, I'm going to let this dry and just do a little bit of smoothing on it, and then I'll be ready to go ahead and start doing the white coat. And I finished cleaning up the parts that I added some photo etch to on the back, so that's painted as well, and that's ready to go also. So once this dries and I smooth it a bit, I'll go ahead and get the whole thing glued on, well, this part glued onto the wing section, and the engine part is removable for batteries, like I said, and then go ahead and start getting a final white coat on that, and it'll be ready for decaling. All right, so I have the fuselage glued onto the wing section, and make sure there's no light leaks. A little bit of rough glue just where the edges meet and let that dry a bit. And then I'll just take some sandpaper down there and sand that smooth again so it marries up. But it fits pretty well. For some weird reason, they don't have any, they have those little, I guess those are some kind of lights or something there on that side, on this side. From what I understand, I guess there were some clear plastic pieces that went into there on the original kit, but there's nothing on this one, so I'm not quite sure why that is. But once it's done and I get this all painted white, I'm going to put some silver in there maybe, and then put like a little drop of 5-minute epoxy and let it kind of round out to be a kind of a lens kind of thing. So, okay. All right, so we'll let that dry. And then I'll be ready to go ahead and get this put together with the engine part and start painting it white. All right, come along fantastically. All right, so finishing up the decals, they're coming along really well. Most of them go on fairly easily, especially the wings, the flat parts, that kind of thing. A little bit of trouble with the ones on the curved sections, like this big old piece on the top. It's on there fairly well, but there's just a tiny little bit of wrinkling in a few spaces. Same with the back engine. That top piece just does not want to go on there right, so I'm going to let that just set up a little bit. I am using some micro set, and I do need to get some micro sol. I don't have any of that. Micro set helps you to adhere them to the kit, so you put a little bit down first, put the decal in water, put it on, then put a little bit on the top just to soften it a little bit. Micro sol is supposed to dissolve it and make it fit around contours and things like that. So I'll need to pick up some of that here and then get that on top of some of these just to smooth them out a bit. Otherwise, they're going on really well. It's looking pretty good. Just about ready to put on the last wing section, and then I'll just let that set up, and then we'll get those smoothed out and get a flat coat, and then we'll pretty much be finished up with this. Okay. All right, so all of the decaling is done. Let me just do a little pan around. Really cool Pan Am symbol there, Pan American. And those ones, the Pan American and the logo, I got separately. From Cult TV Man, they came as a separate decal sheet that you cut out and put onto it. They didn't come with the kit, probably because they couldn't get the licensing, something like that. We have the front area of the cockpit. A big piece on top, which was very tricky. Alright, let me show you. If I can, it'll be wobbly, but let me show you the bottom. And I have the big Pan Am on the bottom as well, as you can see. Sorry for the shakiness there. All right, I'm not going to take off the masking on the windows just yet because I have to let these dry and set. And then I'm going to see about getting some solva set so I can smooth out this really crappy rough area back here. Other than that though, the decals went on pretty well. The flat parts especially went on really well. They weren't really a problem. A little bit of trickiness on this big top section, but everything else was fine. Alright, So once I get those settled in and get some solvent set on them, I just have to do a final flat coat, a dull coat over the whole thing, and seal all of those in, and take away the gloss from the ship. And then I'll be ready to take off the window mask and the cockpit and test her out. All right, and then the ship will be all done. A little bit of touch up just on the back here, just a little bit between the black and the white, and then start thinking about a base for it. So, all right, so we'll be wrapping this up very shortly. Okay. All right, so I got a flat coat onto my Space Clipper, dulled down all of the decals, and I just used some Testors dull coat. It needs just a tiny bit more, but before I do that, I'm going to follow the advice of another modeler on a Facebook page that I'm a member of, where he suggested lightly misting some white to dull down the starkness of these decals, and I kind of agree with them. They are fairly bright and it looks a little unnatural on the kit. So I masked off the black parts on the back, and I'm mainly just looking at the decals that I want to mist down. I'm going to start on the bottom and see how that looks, because if I don't like it, I might just not do it on the top, but I probably will. So I'm going to start with a real light misting of some flat white, just to slightly dull it down a bit, and then I can put yet another flat coat on top of that if I need to. All right, let me go ahead and do that, and then we'll see how that looks. All right, and here is the final blending of a light white misting, and it brought those colors down from the starkness to be a lot more blended in. So when you look further away, it looks like one homogeneous ship, which is supposed to be, like the Discovery. Looks like it's all white. When you get closer in though, you can see the individual panels that have some different delineation, and as well as the logos, so they would be a bit faded from use. So there we go. All right, so most of it's nicely blended in and not showing any wrinkles or anything like the big top one here. Nice and smooth. A little bit still on this. It's a little really hard to get that there because of that shape. The only thing I don't like about these decals is they are really thick. Now they needed to be for some of these really tiny little panels, but in the end they ended up being a problem because they just don't want to snug down to these curved sections here. So, all right, but that is all completed as far as I want it to be right now. Anything I have left to do is to put on a little bit of weathering, like some black soot marks in different places. I want to study the pictures of the studio model, and then kind of go from there. But for now, let's go ahead and remove the window masks and light this up, and we'll call this video finished, other than just a little bit of weathering and working on the base. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. All right, and there are the window masks off of it. I can get in there and show you. You can see the, come on, focus. There we go. Okay, you can see the lights inside of there, a little blue from the TV screens. Now I am going to have to use a brush to lighten up these frames I had covered, because there's a noticeable difference between them, but other than that, that's not a problem. Let me go ahead and turn it around this way. There you go, you can see those lights a little better. And there we go, and there's the cockpit. Same thing with that. I'm going to have to go in and just do a little bit of painting around it. For the most part, that looks pretty good. I don't want to turn the lights out completely because it just looks too washed out at that point. But there we go. That's a pretty cool shot. All right. All right, so a lot of work, a lot of progress. I'm going to go ahead and call this a wrap. And call the ship finished for now, other than just a little bit of weathering and highlighting, like the little black little ports right here. A little bit of black soot coming out from behind this, some on the bottom, maybe a little bit on the wings. We'll see on the front. All right. All right, so thank you to all my subscribers. And I'll start looking at the rest of that, and then I just have to come up with a base idea. I have a few ideas I'm throwing around. But otherwise, I'm very pleased with how this has turned out. All right. Well, thanks to everyone, and I will see you next time.